Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jim Tollerton, longtime member, and Elise Fortin I will introduce momentarily, docent at the Ringling for 8 years, something like that. And we have a resident expert, Sherry Philpott, as I mentioned, will lead a tour on Tuesday, March 5th of the religious arts, starting with the Rubens Gallery, which, if you have not been to the Ringling, is the first really 2 galleries that you walk into. And as Elise will explain, these are massive pictures. She's going to steal some of your thunder. These were originally counter-Reformation efforts by the Roman Catholic Church, primarily in Spain, which was still Catholic. And of course, the Protestant Reformation had started, and the Catholics were saying, well, wait a minute, we need to counter that. So they created, the lady who Elise will describe, funded Rubens, who was a very famous painter at the time, to do the Triumph of the Eucharist. That's what the series is called, the Triumph of the Eucharist, because the Eucharist, the Mass, is the central service, of course, of the Catholic Church, Anglo-Catholic Church, and so forth. And they're spectacular. There were however many of them, and as she'll explain, that we lost most of them in a fire a couple hundred years ago. John Ringling discovered these and wanted to buy them. His art advisor said, no, you want to. Well, they bought them anyway, and he literally built the galleries you're going to see around the paintings. They are so massive they cannot be stolen. Now, they could cut them out of the frames, which are spectacular, when you're going to see in a minute. But what I want to say is, if you want to have some fun and enjoy a morning out, Tuesday, March 5th, Sherry Philpott and Father Wilson are going to lead a walking tour. Hi, Annie. Of the religious art. It's about an hour and change, and they start in the Rubens Gallery and they go down several of the galleries, pointing out the significance, because as you know, at that time, 500 years ago, the church had the money, so they could hire the painters to do the art. Of course, what you got was religious art, and of course then the Dutch made money trading, and they decided they didn't like all this religious stuff. They were more Protestant and so forth. But what I've done is I printed out, it's limited to 20 people. It's $20 if you are not a member of the Ringling, which we would encourage you to do. $75 single membership and so forth, or more. But if you're a Ringling member, of course, it's free, but we would like to know that you're coming, because we are limited to 20 people. And I'm going to pass this down if you decide you want to attend, or call the church. $20 to the Church of the Redeemer will be collected, and then we'll pay for the tickets. So my wonderful friend Elise Fortin agreed to do this, that she is a docent, very knowledgeable about, I don't know if you know this, but the docents are highly trained tour guides. It's what, a year process practically, and they are given a final exam. What is it, 600 questions or something? Massive exam. So they are not just volunteers that show up and walk around. They are really, really knowledgeable about this. Of course, this is powerful. So enough of me. Thank you all for coming. Elise Fortin is a Redeemer member, as is, of course, Sherry Philpott, and originally from Quebec City in Canada. Moved to Seattle and the Washington area, was in the private banking business for a number of years, moved here almost 10 years ago, and has been a member of Redeemer. So she's agreed to kind of walk us through the 5 remaining images. The Louvre has one or two?
They have a whole room. I'll talk about that.
Okay, all right, shut up, Jim. Elise Fortin.
So you take care of 2 things. The accent, first of all, because my first language is French. I always say that at the beginning of any presentation, because people will spend the entire presentation thinking, is she from Austria? Is she from Germany? It's fascinating what I hear as feedback. Not Australian and not South America, but I've heard it all.
May we?
Exactly, may we? But I've been here for over 30 years in the States, and thinking that, eventually I would just catch up with the American accent, but it's not happening. So.
That's okay. That's okay.
And I've been at the Ringling for 9 years, and my fellow docent who's been there for much longer, Sherry, will be leading the tour. So today this is an introduction, but I wanted to give you some context, and sometimes it's good to hear it from 2 people, because you'll see it on slides. It will not do it justice the way it will be in person. But then it's an intro. You reflect on it, and when you go, you'll have a spiritual moment with Sherry and Father Wilson. So you're in for a treat. And I've done those tours. It's really fabulous. So I wanted to give you a little bit of context about two things about the triumph of the Eucharist. The fact that John Ringling chose to bring them to the Ringling. Interestingly, he was not a Catholic. He was not a religious man even. But these paintings belong to the Duke of Westminster in London, and this was the last stop where John was with his consultant after a 5-year buying spree in Europe. And these paintings have been on the market. They're very large, as you'll see them. And they had been on the market for many years, and then Sotheby's had tried to sell them, but the size of these paintings don't fit in a regular room. And John Ringling saw that as a perfect opportunity to bring them to the museum and create a wow moment. Being a circus man, when you create a museum, you want to come in and you want to wow people. These were the crowning moments. And it's a blessing that these paintings from Rubens came here to America because they were protected during the war. So they were here. They are in a room that was designed for them. So it's slightly dark. It creates that mood when you go in that room. And the colors are protected as well. The room, interestingly, was inspired by a room at the Louvre. Also for Rubens, Mary de Medici is the theme over there. And if you go to the Louvre, you'll be surprised to see that in their great wisdom at the Louvre, they renovated the room. So they removed all the details, everything that made this room so beautiful like ours. And now it's a white room, a big white box with all the Rubens and Mary de Medici. And neon light, I swear. We have the atmosphere. We kept it, where you have architecture in the room echoing what you see in the paintings. So it's very special. About the series itself, it is special in itself because it was first created. It was, I'll give you the story of the person who commissioned them. Maybe that will make more sense. We're bringing you to the early 1600s. As you mentioned, the Counter-Reformation. This was a time when the church was splitting. And the Catholic Church not only was losing their flock, they were losing their funding. When you lose your funding, you lose your support. You lose, your control of certain countries. So this was creating a lot of upheaval in Europe. When the art was art of contemplation, since the Renaissance, you would see everything that was more, there was no action. You would see the Virgin Mary, with her son. You would see art of contemplation because it would go into church. Art changed because now marketing had to be involved. You had to bring people back. So you saw art with more action, art that was more compelling, art that would draw you in. They wanted to bring their flock back. So it's a good thing. It's interesting to see what happened in history influenced art. And you'll see that during this period. That is a Baroque period. Very theatrical. Rubens was a master at that. And he was in the Netherlands. And the Netherlands at that time were occupied by Spain. And Spain was there to protect the Catholic faith because it was in danger in the Netherlands of moving, and it was splitting. So Infanta Isabella Claire Eugenia was in the Netherlands as a regent. She was her family center there. She thought she was going to be there for a few years. She was there for 31 years. Her goal, she was a very pious woman. She was going to retire to a convent. That was her goal. But instead, she was the defender of the faith in the Netherlands. She ordered a series of tapestries based on the triumph of the Eucharist that would go to her convent, where she was going to retire. And Rubens created those tapestries, a very different method than painting. Painters would work on creating tapestries, and the method would be that they would paint some models called modello, and then these models would be used, would be like stripes of paper of the painting, the schematic. These stripes of papers would be pinned with needles all over, outlining the whole scene. And then they would be given to the tapestry maker, and they would do everything in reverse. So the scenes would be done in reverse. Imagine the art form, it's quite amazing. So these tapestries were made and given as a gift to the convent in Spain. And Jim visited that convent. It's quite remarkable. He saw those tapestries.
Convent of the Poor Clares.
Yes. Her name, her namesake, her namesake. It will be important in the slides that I will show you, the paintings here. So she loved those tapestries so much. She's not going anywhere, you know, anytime soon to see those tapestries on a daily basis. So she asked Rubens, would you do paintings for me? And that's where the series came up. And then she had a series where she could really enjoy them. And what we'll show you today are 5 of the paintings. 4 were acquired from the Duke of Westminster's, and the Ringling Museum, more recently, in the last 20 years, acquired the 5th one. That's the last one we'll see. And then you see an example of a tapestry. You see that tapestries don't age as well as paintings. But those, so I'd like to talk to you briefly about each of these paintings that you're going to see when you do the tour with Sherry at the Ringling. So the first one I want to mention is the largest one. It's the one that draws you in. It's the one when I do presentation, I bring people to this painting. And it's important in the theme of the Eucharist because this one is sort of the beginning. And Rubens has a lot of symbols. So I will explain to you some of them. I know you cannot see well today, but you know, I'll just point out to a few things and you'll get the spirit of it. And when you go to the museum, you'll be just inside of it all. So here, this is a scene from the Old Testament. And I'm going to refer to my note here to tell you the subject is from Genesis 14, 17, 24. And the scene here, Rubens was very good at colors. He was good at drawing you in. So you see the 2 protagonists here. Abraham, dressed with his red cape, meeting with Melchizedek, the king of Salem. The theme here is the battle of Dan. Abraham has won the battle. He brings the offering to the king of Salem, and in return, the king, Melchizedek, offers the bread and the wine. So the symbolic nature here is seen in, you know, the king being just a little higher up, just like at church, a little higher up here, giving the wine and the bread to Abraham. And you see the acolytes here attend the priest, just as you would see in the Eucharist. So these are all nods to the Eucharist, so much so that even the hat that the king is wearing is precursor to what the Pope would be wearing as a papal hat. So all of these signs that people of that time would have noted and would have read into it. What makes it Baroque, what makes it, you know, more action taken is that away from the art of contemplation is the movement. You see the 2 protagonists meeting in the middle. You see the people around you, all the figures looking at you. There is movement. It's theater. Again, because these were tapestries, you see the borders around here are not what you would see typically in a painting, but in a tapestries always have borders, and these are paintings of the tapestry. So that creates even more theater. So you can imagine something like that. That's quite a departure from what you would have seen in church. The other painting, and I will ask Jim, are you able to move on to the next one, is almost sort of a, you know, a follow-up to that in a way, another nod to the Eucharist. But in this case, and I'll tell you something interesting about la mana. In French, we use that term. It's an expression that we use, and it's not an expression that's used in English at all. In French, we say, oh my God, la mana fell from the sky, saying you got something, you got some money, surprise money, or something happened. We use that all the time. So when I moved to the States, I said, okay, where's that expression? It's not used at all, so you should start using it. So in this case, la mana here, it is, you know, from the Exodus 16:13-36. The Israelites, you know, walked through the desert of Sinai. They were very hungry. The miracle came that, you know, la manna fell from the sky. In this case here, Rubens chose to represent it, and you don't see it again on this as well, but you see the golden hue. It is all these gold wafers of honey that are falling from the sky. Again, a lot of movement. You see, believe me, they're not dressed to do a walk in the desert. This is so Rubens in silk and jewels. But the principle and the idea is that there is movement, there is joy in receiving the manna. And there is also hunger in this person in the middle that is leaning to the ground to gather it. So these are sort of companion almost. Abraham and Melchizedek, again, the reference to the Eucharist itself. As we follow to the next painting, then you'll start doing reference that is different. It is about the people who recorded the Eucharist. The people who recorded the story of the Eucharist. And
momentarily. When you go, you'll see that they actually acquired columns very similar to this, and that they're standing right beside this painting.
Very much. It's art and serendipity, because John Ringling, it was an antique dealer that was closing and had these columns for sale, and he bought it in the United States, even though they come from Italy. And he said, my God, it's an echo of that painting. But art has a funny way to just meet. It's the same as your collection at home. You have some echo of each other.
They are, yeah.
And here, in this case, yes, the columns with another, Parish. So, we've got, in this case, who recorded the Last Supper. So it's a different take on the Eucharist here, but these are the apostles who recorded and you have them with their symbols that they are seen in many paintings. So painters at the time, artists would borrow from each other. Like Saint Jerome usually has a red cape. So in this case, you will find the animals here that are attached to each of those. So you will see Saint Luke to the left, is a person right here, and you see an ox. Usually you will see Saint Luke with the ox, and the ox is a symbol of sacrifice, and that goes back to the Bible in Zechariah. Saint Mark here, with his yellow cape that's twirling around, is seen with a lion, and he's got his gospel under his arm. And the lion here is the symbol in paintings that you'll find of the Christ of resurrection. And one of my favorite is Saint Matthew right here. Saint Matthew is usually Saint Matthew and the angels. Even at the Ringling, you'll see other paintings, you'll see Saint Matthew with the angels. There's this beautiful relationship here. And in this case, he's pointing to the gospel that Saint Matthew wrote, and he's pointing to the sky, where the inspiration came from. In another painting, you'll see that gesture again. So everything sort of talks to each other here. And finally, Saint John, the youngest here, a couple of symbols here. The eagle has had apparently the ability to be able to look at the sun, and without flinching, was the only animal that could do that. So that's why it's a symbol in a lot of paintings. And in this case, this is a sign that John was able to call the apocalypse. So usually you see the eagle with John. And you have the cup here that is a reference, and there is a snake apparently that I don't see. So I have to look very closely. And the snake refers to John drinking from the cup. So it's all these things that were part of the history that were just little nods in these paintings all over. So you'll get, of course, a lot more details when you see it for real. But I'm just giving you the idea that painters, as you will look at other paintings from other artists, were using the same symbols and were teaming them up with the same apostle. Yes, and then the four evangelists, and then we go to the defenders. This one is crowded with a lot of actors. We're talking more contemporary of the time, because in the middle is the lady who commissioned all these paintings. It is Eugenia, Infanta Eugenia, because her name was Claire as well. She is portrayed here as Saint Claire. And you have, these are not the other figures here are not of the same era at all. You've got Saint Jerome, not of the same era as Norbert from Germany that is next to him. But these are all a symbol of the defenders of the Eucharist. At their time, they had to do something meaningful. Like Saint Jerome has his Bible here as he translated the Bible into Latin. So you will always see Saint Jerome with this hat very often, and that cape in the red. And then the reference here to Norbert, I'm not sure what it is, and it could have to do with some historical connotation of that time. And then you have Thomas Aquinas, addressed as a Dominican in the back, and then you have Saint Gregory here, who was very instrumental in the writings of the Bible as well. And then we finish with Saint Ambrose here, who's known for asserting the dogma of the divine presence in the Eucharist. It's that precise. So everybody had a role. Nobody from the same era, but for the sake of this painting, they were just reunited together as the defenders of the Eucharist. And we end here with the last one, which is the one that was acquired by the Ringling later on, and we were so lucky to get this one, because there are like 2 others surviving in the world, 2 or 3. This one is the triumph of the divine love. And this one doesn't have the same pertinent meaning to the Eucharist. This is more about love. This is more about charity. here representing also the mother that would have enough milk to give to all the children of the world, a nod to Mary, a nod to love with Cupid. So we're closing with something that's in line with St. Valentine's. And the last one is to show you what I meant by these tapestries, and that is a tapestry that is at the entrance of the beautiful gallery, and you will see it's quite faded. And that's what happens to tapestries. So we're so lucky to have this series in paintings. It's just amazing.
And they look like that in Madrid, in the convent, because they're basically open air. I mean, there's a roof, they're arcade,
Yes.
but it's open air.
And that convent is not a museum, so they do not have the same quality and
500
conditions.
years will do that to,
Yes.
to tapestry.
When you go to the museum, wear a big sweater. It's very cold in that. They're just preserving everything.
Did Rubens